All right. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming. My name is Michelle Raymond and I'm the director of Archer Gallery and Clark Art Talks here at Clark College. And I'm so excited today to have Yulia Pinkusevich with us to talk about her exhibition Calm Under the Waves in the Blue of My Oblivion. It is an art exhibition that we are opening today at Archer Gallery at archergallery.space. So do check it out. I sent the link in the chat. So you can just kind of, while I'm talking, maybe kind of peruse it, or after the talk, feel free to check it out. We have such fantastic programming this year, even though we're all entirely virtual. We have art talks, 9 of them throughout the year. We have 2 coming up in the next 2 months that I'm really excited about. The first one is actually a week from today. We have Robert Minervini, who is a fantastic Bay Area painter and muralist, who's going to be talking with us again at noon, February 26th. And then the next one after that is March 12th, and it's going to be Jeffrey Augustine Sanko, who is a fantastic sculptor and installation artist. So that'll be amazing as well. Everything will be on the website. So Zoom links, recordings of all these talks, just everything that you need to know is going to be there. So if you ever have any questions, just stop by archergallery.space and peruse what we are up to. Beyond that, I want to just say some thank yous, as always, to the art department at Clark. Lisa, thank you so much for being such a fantastic support system for me and our programming. You are just incredible, and I love working with you, so thank you. I want to say thank you to Katharina Holsinger, Sally Tomlinson, Jean Bybee, Grant Hoddle, Sensinie Stokes, and everybody else, all the other faculty members that I work with. You all are fantastic. And then also to the associated students of Clark College, ASCC, and all of the people that work there. Thank you for supporting our programs as well, funding and otherwise. I really appreciate you all. All right, so without further ado, I would love to introduce Yulia and say a little bit about her before we get into her art talk today. So Yulia and I've probably known Yulia almost 10 years at this point. We showed together in San Francisco at SOMARTS as part of the Murphy Cadogan MFA Award exhibition show. And I just fell in love with her work then, and I've been following her since then. She makes these just fabulous, fantastic, immersive installations and drawings. And if you ever get a chance to see them in person, I think that it's just an incredible experience. So hopefully at some point we can bring her work into the physical space at Clark. Since graduating with her MFA from Stanford University in 2012, Yulia has gone on to become Associate Professor of Studio Arts at Mills College. She was born in Ukraine, which was USSR at the time. Upon the collapse of the Soviet Union, her family fled the Eastern Bloc as refugees immigrating to New York City. Yulia has exhibited nationally and internationally, including site-specific projects in Paris and Buenos Aires. Yulia's art is in the public collection of the De Young Museum, Stanford University, Facebook headquarters, Google headquarters, and the city of Albuquerque. She has been awarded residency grants from Gray Area Arts Foundation, Wildlands, Lucid Arts Foundation, Autodesk Pier 9, and Recology in San Francisco, along with Headland Center for the Arts and Site des Arts International in Paris. Her work has been written about in publications, including New American Paintings, Stanford Magazine, De Young Magazine, Vice, the Miami Herald, Dwell, Adbusters, KQED, and Rhizome. It is my pleasure to host her today from her home in Oakland, California. And please help me welcome Yulia.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. It's such a pleasure to be here. Big thanks to Archer Gallery and Clark College for hosting me today. And big thanks to Michelle for, getting it all online. I think the show turned out really well, and it's been a wonderful experience to take on this new challenge of virtual exhibitions. So I guess I'll just start sharing my screen and see how that goes. Let's see. All good? Can
Yep,
you guys
looks great.
you all see my screen? Okay, very cool. So, just take a breath,
You got this.
launching into talking at you for 30 minutes. So the talk is titled Calm Under the Wave in the Blue of My Oblivion, which is a little bit of, well, it's an homage to one of my favorite singers, Fiona Apple, but also, this calm under the wave, I thought really described our kind of moment in time. And yeah, I'll talk more about it. But first, I'm going to start with some kind of talking a little bit about how the work came to be. And I start with this image of Francis Bacon because it was a painting that was really influential to me as a young artist. I used to work down the street from MoMA in New York, and I would go there for lunch and just visit this painting. Anyway, sometimes you have a moment in your life that feels profound. Perhaps it's a poignant exchange or a sight you see. And this is how I arrived at a body of work I'm going to share with you today. Quite a while back in 2007, I spent a couple of months living in Argentina. And before leaving Buenos Aires, I decided to go to the local zoo, which was just down the street from my hostel. At the zoo there, I encountered this orangutan named Sandra. She was sitting in this glass cage looking pretty devoid of life, and crowds of people would come by, snap a photo, and then just continue on. And nothing seemed to shake her. She was not interested at all in any of these people. She really just looked very sad and uninterested. When the zookeeper came, all of a sudden, he started washing the glass, and this orangutan saw him, and you could tell she recognized him and just locked eyes, and this like amazing transformation happened. Her expression just came to life. And, we had I stayed and I drew her for a little bit, and, that was all that really happened. But watching this animal's transformation really affected me. And at the time I was living in New York, and I got back to New York, and I started seeing that same devoid look in people's eyes on the train and going to work, and it made me really reflect a lot on captivity of the mind and what the state of psychological entrapment really means. I also started thinking about how the structures that surround us define, influence our actions and perhaps even our thoughts. This, thinking, is the built environment a physical map of our psyche? This is an image of the block where I was working at the time. I used to work for Christie's, the auction house, and which is located in Rockefeller Center. And so, during my lunch break, this would be my sliver of sky. So anyway, these were the first drawings I made, which focused on psychology of space and mental captivity. They depicted that perspective, like trying to embody that animal's, perspective from a cage. And I started working primarily with charcoal and beeswax on paper and working monochromatically. I chose to reduce my work to its essential elements intentionally. Before that, I was making kind of more elaborate paintings. The compositions became abstract spaces, not places which exist, evolving and opening up to explore infinity in the mind. And as I was developing those drawings, drawing really led me to consider surface, and architecture is just another surface. So as my work evolved, I became interested in art as an experience. This piece is titled The Great Temple of Fallen Civilization, and it questions the skyscraper architecture and the need for our ever-growing density of the built environment. And as you could see, this is a time lapse of several days of me making this wall drawing. It's pretty rigorous and messy, and it takes many days to execute. And due to this physical nature, it can be kind of a spectacle to watch. I usually work alone, as many artists do, and become accustomed to that solitude. Sometimes I feel pretty stifled when I feel like somebody's watching me work. So as a method of conquering this fear, I wanted to explore the artistic process and expose it to the public. And perhaps I naturally arrived at performance performative process because as a child, I spent 10 years studying classical ballet and dancing for 3 seasons at Lincoln Center in New York. In the Nutcracker. Anyway, I gave up dance as a teenager to focus on visual arts, and now years later, it's nice to find, through the vehicle of drawing, to find expression through the body. So some more of my wall drawings. This one conceptually focuses on fragmented visions of architectural layering and psychological perceptions of that built environment. As a child, I lived during a time of deep uncertainty and massive restructuring. In the 80s, in the USSR, the country was going through a political movement called perestroika, which was initiated to create massive reform and try to save communist ideology from failure. The USSR propagated communism through art, design, and architecture. And this mural utilizes a politicized visual language to challenge some of these established political structures. Formally, my work also engages with the direct experience of the viewer through perspectival illusion and spatial perceptions, which play with your understanding of space. This is a project I created at Facebook headquarters. It considers the long road to restoration of ecological damage made in the name of progress. The piece depicts the salt flats around the Facebook campus in the Bay Area. This is a piece from 2015, which utilizes the aesthetics of protest and the media's depiction of resistance. The painting is made on linen, but is stretched on the wall like a banner, and sandbags actually hold up part of it. I'm kind of focusing on people's uprisings around the globe, and actually since I made this piece in 2015, there's been a lot more of that, so it feels pretty timely. Maybe you noticed I really love working with familiar and easily accessible materials. Partly it's to be able to create impactful work wherever I go. This is a mural made with salt and charcoal, or chalk, I should say, white chalk, and a little bit of paint. This was made in Charleston, South Carolina. So this is a project that I created in graduate school where I learned about tessellations, or geometric planes tiled with repeating shapes. So I wanted to create, actually I kind of wanted to move my drawings, my kind of three-dimensional architectural drawings into 3D spaces, and it took me a long time to figure out how to do so. But I ended up making this tessellated fabric titled Polyscape, made out of locally recycled polypropylene plastic, which is what milk jugs are made of. So it's something you handle every day, and usually we just throw it away, but it's actually kind of an interesting material. And I've had this piece for over 10 years and it looks just fine. This installation also used infrared sensors to detect when people were walking underneath it, and so the piece would then undulate kind of like water. The installation hopes to model alternative uses for disposable plastic and to bring awareness to our relationship to this material. So I really try to challenge myself by taking on projects that are unlike anything I've done before. This project used over 2,000 donated books to build a structure, and it was important for me not to damage any of the books in the process while making it structurally sound. So all these books were donated to charity after the show. And it was also really important to make sure that kids, and we had performers in there reading poetry over the course of the exhibition, and I was very nervous about it collapsing on people. So I made, certain that, but no hardware was used. We just linked the books cover to cover, and it's incredibly strong. It's kind of fun. Anyway, not everything I do is impermanent. This is a public art commission at Stanford University in the McMurtry Art and Art History building. And this piece is titled Sima, S-I-M-A. It's sculptural seating made out of local redwood, and it's situated in the atrium of Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro's design building, who I'm a big fan of Liz Dillard. Anyway, so it was a really big honor to have this piece be at my alma mater. And I really love to see it be put to use. This is a photo somebody sent me of kids just hanging out on it, which I think is really lovely. And then, oh, that's weird. My GIFs aren't working. Oh, anyway, okay, that's strange. I was just showing some people dancing on it, but don't worry about it. In 2019, I was invited to create an installation at San Francisco State University. And this was during a time when the news was flooded with talk about the border wall. And so I created a wall made of 1,600 pounds of salt. And over the course of the exhibition, the spring rain here in the Bay Area dissolved almost the entire wall, and only a few scraps of the salt bricks remained. And so you could see on the left is an image of when the wall collapsed, and on the right is kind of the remains after the rain when it had to deinstall, technically. A local art critic named Kelly Kirkland wrote, "The gradual decomposition of a wall, a structural symbol for defense, takes on an explicitly political tone against the backdrop of the current political discourse surrounding immigration. Border walls create some of the most hostile built environments that exist. Seeing a symbol of isolationism subjected to the daily microaggressions of water and wind, viewers are prompted to imagine the process of dismantling similar structures of detainment and containment on a broader scope." I thought it was a beautiful way to summarize the ideas of this work. So I mentioned I really love working on site, and in the summer of 2019, just after that salt wall was finished, I was invited to be an artist in residence at Wildlands in Healdsburg, California, kind of just north of the wine country. And I was really inspired by the serenity of that place, deep in the California oak forest. As a ritualistic practice, I hike daily to spend time with the forest and collect oak galls in the process. Oak galls, or oak apples, grow on certain valley oaks as a result of a parasitic wasp laying its larva in the oak twig. The wasp larva secretes a hormone so similar to the oak's own, the oak will grow a gall as a way to both excrete the parasite, excrete the parasite and protect the larva. This commensalistic relationship really spoke to me. The gall is both the result of an irritant, but it also gives the wasp an offering of food and shelter. This installation contemplates this complex relationship, which for me not only speaks to the interdependent living systems we're all a part of, but it also symbolizes a poetic way to embrace the difficulties of life, something we're all getting much better at, I guess. And most galls have a hole in them. You can kind of see it's a little blurry in this photo, but it's actually a tiny tunnel that's created by the wasp as it matures and chews its way out through the gall. I ended up suspending 108 of these galls that I painted red with red string. And from some perspectives, I should say I suspended it in this 500-year-old tree. And from certain perspectives, you can really see the arched brows mirroring Buddha's brow of a statue located just across from the cottage I stayed in. Here you could see how the galls draw the brows and the tree becomes the Buddha, the landscape, like a view through the eyes of the Buddha. And I should say that it's really devastating. I just found out last weekend that this property actually was hit by the fire season last year, and a lot of it burned, which is just so sad. It's such a beautiful place. But apparently this 500-year-old oak is recuperating, so it's continues on, which is kind of beautiful in its resilience. So later that year, I developed an installation using salt and oak galls again, while I was a member of the Experiential Space Research Lab at Gray Area Arts Foundation in San Francisco. With funding from the Knight Foundation, a group of 11 artists, scientists, designers, and architects were tasked with creating an immersive installation about Earth's living systems. The exhibition was titled, "This Will Be the End of You," and the beginning of us. A short video.
My name is Yulia Pinkusevich. I'm a visual artist working in the Bay Area. lot of my work deals with the psychology of spaces, immersive art that goes beyond spectacle. It's a way for people to understand that they are part of a larger system by dissolving their ego. If you had to ask what emotion is most important to me, maybe a sense of awe.
So this immersive installation took place in February of 2020, and just before COVID lockdowns, when you could still lay down next to a stranger and it not feel weird at all. And this was my exhibit. There were 7 different exhibitions as a part of the larger show, and my piece was titled "The Luxuriant, Prolific, and Dying." It explored the nature of personhood and the personhood of nature, challenging and expanding perceptions of persons and how they are understood. Visitors were invited to stay and listen to 2 versions of a guided meditation created by Spherical Studios, and the projections were in the back that you see here were made by Stephen Stangridge. So it was a collaborative effort. And the installation aimed to dissolve one's ego by confronting the impermanence of life. The full audio meditations, one is 5 minutes and one is about 10. They're both on my website, and I highly recommend you listen to them. They're pretty fantastic. And I'm just going to show you a couple more images of people laying underneath the alder tree. The alder came from the East Bay here in California. And this is an incense cedar that came from my college, from this college. It was a great learning experience to figure out how to move these things. And just one more photo. These are photos by Don and David of Spherical Studio, listening to their audio piece. And actually, curiously, while I was working on that piece, End of You, I learned that Sandra the orangutan, who I mentioned at the start of the lecture, became the first non-human animal recognized as a person in a court of law, and was finally moved to a sanctuary in Florida, which is kind of amazing and really remarkable to me that 12 years after the chance encounter at the zoo, this non-human person has had a real impact on me and my work, and in part is responsible for me being here in front of you today. So what non-human person has had that impact on your life? So I really enjoy creating installations, but they're extremely labor intensive and demanding. So I lean on drawing as a foundational practice, which not only contributes to my site-specific work, but gives me an opportunity to create more personal work. I start with the simplest of tools, charcoal and paper. To me, this simplicity has a certain ease, yet its immediacy is impactful. The more I push my process, the more complex my drawings become. For me, drawing is primal, a childlike pleasure, a pause, but it can also be a great release, a channeling of energy and emotion, and a translation of a feeling. These are some details. The physical act is demanding, requiring a focus and energy not unlike a dance. These works on paper that I'm showing you now are from a relatively recent series titled Casualty Isorhythm, which I've been making since 2018. The series uses the visual language of military maps, which juxtapose clean and calculated lines against the gestural and frenetic mark, aiming to bridge the tension between the map's intent and impact of what it depicts. These drawings, for me, aim to capture the energy of a place. A couple of details just showing you I draw my personal experience of growing up in the USSR at the end of the Cold War, as well as the ever-increasing tension of the current political climate now, to create charcoal and ink marks made by gestures and physical movements that react to and synthesize the complex relationship between these two countries. These works attempt to reconcile nuclear war, rationalized through a mathematical formula, by offering empathetic gestures of representations of war and destruction. I wanted to also mention that the word isorhythm is the way the military name these maps, but it's actually a term borrowed from musicology. In Greek, it means the same rhythm, and it's a musical technique of repeating rhythm patterns through a composition. First, it was used to describe 13th century French motets. It kind of makes sense for the drawings too, lots of repeating rhythms. This work is actually currently on view in Palo Alto at Qualia Contemporary. So, you know, not a lot of you are in the Bay Area, but anyway. So I'm going to just shift gears a little bit and give you some context for this recent work that's in the exhibition at Archer while this video plays, and I'll explain. So at the start of 2020, I think we all had a lot of plans. We were moving fast and going places and doing things, and I was no different. And suddenly things changed. And here we are, pretty much a year into the pandemic, being asked to stand still. I've been reflecting on this newfound stillness in the world and in my life this past year. And I hesitate to admit that in many ways I've taken solace in this forced stillness. For me, it's been over 10 years since I've been running non-stop, working with no real breaks. And like many of you, I crammed so many things into my life. Let's turn it down a little bit so you can hear. As I began to slow down last spring, I also found time to look inwards, going deeper and learn more about where I came from and who my ancestors were. Much of it was lost through migration, through the war, through government, forced amnesia, and death. Mostly what I knew was recent history dating back a generation or two. And I'm showing you these acrobats because they're actually my great uncles on my mother's side. This is Boris and Vladimir Voronin, and they were identical twins and athletes, and eventually became pretty famous acrobats with the Moscow Circus. They toured internationally during the Eastern blockade and even appeared in a couple of Soviet films like the one you see here. It's called 2 Hours Earlier. It's from 1966. But I find the special effects really charming. I'm just going to show you, this is their signature move when one brother balances on the other's head while the other one balances on his hands. It's just incredible. Anyway, it's on YouTube. Okay, so I only met those uncles once when I was pretty young. We ended up staying with them in Moscow at their apartment as my parents had to finalize everything for immigration just days before we left. And recently, my father found this INS card, Immigration Naturalization Services. This card was issued to me on the first day we came to the US. The photo was taken at JFK Airport shortly after I took my first flight over the Atlantic Ocean. What really struck me about discovering this document is my stateless status. I mean, I know many immigrants struggle with their fractured identity, but never did I imagine there would be written proof of this ambiguity. I was born in the Soviet Union to a Siberian mother and a Jewish father. These are my ancestors from my Siberian side. I know very little about them. My great-grandfather, Alexei, and his wife, Maria, became veterinarians. You can see her here as a child on the left. This photo was taken in 1909, just 8 years before the Communist Revolution of 1917 in Russia. The back of those photos have some dates and places listed, and it turns out that some of my Siberian family members come from Irkutsk, which is a city, let's see if I can point to it, right here, right on the banks of Lake Baikal. And the other part of my family comes from this area, the Sakha region of Yakutia, further north. Both places are known for its harsh climate and extreme landscapes. Here's some artistic photos of the region to make sure I drive the ice cold home. It's actually really extreme there because it gets very hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. So it's not just always cold, but it's actually very extreme fluctuations. This is Lake Baikal, which is the largest and deepest freshwater lake in the world. It contains more water than all of North America's Great Lakes combined. It's home to hundreds of endemic species of plants and animals, as well as the only freshwater seal. And this rock is dubbed Shaman's Rock. Both of these places in Siberia are known as the heartland of shamanism in its classical form. And it's a practice being revived in that region in recent years. I spent my childhood summers in Siberia with my grandparents, but because native Siberians were brought to the brink of extinction in the 19th century as white Russians moved in, very little indigenous culture remained, especially by the time I was a child. These are historic photos sourced from a Siberian museum, anthropological museum, so not my family. I like this photo too. This is the Burat people from the Lake Baikal region. Look at those costumes, they're just so amazing. I put this here because by the 1920s, Stalin purged whatever remained of shamanism and all other religions, causing a multi-generational amnesia about one's native heritage. Due to the communist purge, people's sacred practices, beliefs, and rituals were forgotten. This amnesia afflicted my family as well, leaving only remnants of strange superstitions that many Russians are still familiar with. I really wanted to learn more and to better understand the indigenous histories both in Russia and in the US. And through some of this anti-colonial research, I read Charles C. Mann's book called 1491. New Revelations of the Americas Before Columbus. I hope some of you've read it. It's pretty great. Through this book and subsequent articles, I discovered that in 2013, new evidence emerged which links native Siberians to Native Americans through mitochondrial DNA. Those books really helped me begin to reframe my own Western colonial settler-centered education. And I'm working to unlearn these histories to become better informed on in a holistic way through holistic histories, ones that include indigenous cultures, both in America and in Russia before the arrival of colonizers. The other thing that's kind of curious is that the kind of Native American history and Native Russian history is similar in the way that they were purged and nearly eradicated. Based on some of this research and subsequent discoveries, I set out to create a series of drawings inspired by the Sakha people's beliefs and rituals. The Sakha people are sun worshippers who embody animist-based beliefs and practices. I also looked at historic art from the region, focusing mostly on petroglyphs and ceremonial objects. I felt it was important to pay homage to these ancient artists on my journey to rediscovering my ancestors. And I just love these stone carvings. They're so intriguing. And I'm gonna just now lead you through some of the aspects of the show, but Michelle hopefully will put a link to the exhibition online and you can peruse it yourself as well. Just for...
I'm just going to drop it in the chat here.
Thank you.
Yep. That piece is just incredible.
Thank you. I should say, oh, Michelle mentioned I had some help with the creation of that cave. And I really wanted to play with the idea of a virtual environment and expand what a virtual exhibition could be. You know, a cave is like the least friendly place to put works on paper. It's damp, it's dark, it's wet. And I thought it was a great opportunity to just do something a little bit beyond what's possible in the physical realm.
If I had had more money and a bigger budget, I would have totally just elaborated on that cave and allowed us to just like have this interactive environment where we could just kind of, you know, walk through the whole thing and interact with all the pieces in that way. Maybe at some point in the future.
We're looking for funding.
Yeah, help
us. Okay, so it's basically a gallery for these drawings, and the work was created as a way to, you know, seeking to reconnect with my lost heritage and contribute towards healing. I began this new body of work in quarantine. I found myself really longing for unity, embracing feminine intuition and symbolism, and this is one of the works in the exhibit. I'm just going to show you some details because they're kind of long format, so it's a little hard to get into it, but on the website you can really scroll and see all the details. I think I mentioned traditionally the Sakha people are sun worshippers. Their particular type of throat singing is really amazing. They can hold two tones at the same time. I highly recommend you check it out. But I'll spare you. They have this interesting belief that three spirits reside in each human: the spirit of the earth, the spirit of the mother, and the spirit of the air. All enter the child at different moments of their early life. This particular piece is about the spirit of the mother. It's both based on the complex journey of being a mother and the divine maternal energy, which is in all of us, regardless of your gender. This is a detail. So this is a work about the spirit of the air, which I also think of as your voice or your breath. And I was making it in the fall of 2020 during the fires. We had really bad fire season here in California, and it really made me think a lot on consider air in a different way and reflecting on how fragile this is. So, this is the last piece I made in the show, and it's kind of based on the tree of life. And the way I think about it is kind of reintegrating your disparate selves. And this one is the spirit of the earth. And well, I don't know if there's much to say about it. My daughter makes an appearance in it as a baby.
I was going to ask that actually. Obviously, we have a baby here, so I was thinking about your role as a mother, you know, within all of this, and kind of thinking about the connection between motherhood now and this, you know, very long family lineage that you're kind of exploring.
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I think there's still so much to learn, but I think becoming a mother really, well, it derailed my life quite a bit, you know, just to be honest, and also like, you know, made me have to reconsider a lot. I started to feel much more connected to like the female trauma in my like lineage, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but that's kind of how it felt. Like it made me really think about all the mothers that came before and all the things they had to endure, and it gave me, you know, also time becomes so much more precious, and it gave me an opportunity to maybe care less about what other people want to see from me and just create work that I really wanted to make. This is quite a departure, as you could see from some of my other work, and it also, these are just some details of the drawing just to show you.
I had a question about that snake specifically.
Sure.
Is it supposed to, because the only thing that I know about snakes in like historical / biblical is the traditional biblical snake equals bad, snake equals the liar. is the snake an omen, or is it the bringer of good?
Well, I guess I wanted to, I didn't really grow up with Christian, Judeo-Christian religious mythology in my life, so it's not necessarily something that's like fully ingrained in me. And like I said, I'm kind of trying to approach my life and my work through this more animist perspective, which kind of gives respect to all beings, not just human beings, but all beings, including the beings that live in your garden and the spirit of the river and the trees and things like that. And so I think that this work really came from that perspective much more. And so to me, the snake, as a gardener, I know that snakes in your garden means that you have a healthy ecosystem in your garden. So I think that it's a good omen in general. At least that's how I kind of perceive it. And so I'm happy to answer more questions, but I'm just going to show you the last video and just a little bit of it.
It's a little loud, Yulia.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something as we're watching this video, specifically that shamanism holds a view of multiple worlds. And there's this belief that the cosmos was multi-veiled. A common description is that there's 3 leveled structures, the upper, the middle, and the lower worlds. And I guess as artists, I am always interested in kind of holding the middle space in mind as one considers, maybe your ancestors, their hardships, their joys, their pleasures, their traumas. I mean, it's great if you can imagine yourself alive, not in the present, but living a tribal life, let's say 100,000 years ago, standing in the grass, not far from an open canopy forest from which you emerged. What was your life like? What were your concerns? What were your joys? For me, this piece kind of embodies this liminal space in between.
What's that?
Is it water?
It's lava, it's water, it's space dust, it's whatever you need it to be.
Sand? Lava.
Yeah, it's water. I think that's it. Thank you. That's all I have, but I'm happy to answer questions. I think we have a little bit of time. Michelle,
Yeah.
should I stop sharing screen maybe?
Yeah, let's do that. And then we can open it up for Q&A. Thank you so much, Yulia. This is amazing.
Thank you.
And feel free to use the chat, everyone, if you want to ask questions through there, if you feel uncomfortable, using audio, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to answer them. Sue had asked about the musician, Yulia, for the last piece, the manifold piece. And there's a story about that we had talked about. So I thought that would be a great thing to kind of start out with.
I'm happy to tell you it's one of these, I really love synchronicities in life and serendipitous opportunities to work with people. that the video I created in 2017, and I'm not an audio person, and I really wanted somebody that knew what they were doing to help with the audio. And at the time, I didn't show you that body of work, but I was making work about Mars essentially at that time, and my work got featured on the European Space Agency's blog, which was really cool. And alongside, they featured other artists working with these space themes, and one of the people that was also featured on the blog was a musician from Georgia, Tbilisi, Georgia, the country. And I thought his sound was really phenomenal. It sounded like he was using some found, audio recordings of space. And I just emailed him like, hey, I have this project and maybe you'd want to collaborate. And he was totally willing. And, this was pre-Zoomlandia, but we did this whole thing on FaceTime and chat, and we never met in person. But he made this really beautiful audio piece for me. And I'm really grateful. And funny enough, he's like, a professional. He's not an artist full time. He's an air traffic controller, and that's his day job. But I thought he did a really nice piece. So check him out. Pisces is his music handle. You can see more work. I see a couple other questions coming in, but I'm having a hard time kind of catching up with all the things. Michelle, do you want to just
Sure. Yeah, I'll read them. Yeah. So Jamie asks, if you're taking questions, I'd be interested to know more about how science and/or scientific study might inform your work. Do you know why you chose to focus on nuclear weapons as an aspect of your Eyes Rhythm work?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And it's hard to jam in 15 years of work into a 30-minute talk. So I didn't go into a lot of details, but I recently gave a lecture that did go into more details on that series. In short, I was asked to work on a collaborative project around Nike missile sites, which was a program, an anti-aircraft missile program that the U.S. ran from I want to say from the mid-50s to the mid-70s, something like that. 72 is when they dismantled a lot of these bunkers, and they were all around the US, these Nike sites. And one of the Nike sites was at the headlands, in the Marin Headlands in the Bay Area, which is really close to an art center there, Headland Center for the Arts. And I was working, on some drawings there, and another artist that I knew and a curator asked me to participate in this project that they were doing, where they were interviewing these vets that are now kind of retirees but volunteer at the site. And the project focused on kind of the in-between aspects of war or nuclear missiles. It was like, these guys never pushed the button, right? Like, they sat there with the power to potentially launch a nuclear weapon, but luckily for all of us, it never happened. And we wanted to talk to them about what it was like to fight an enemy they've never seen. They had 24-hour on, 24-hour off routines, and so they were sleep deprived, and we wanted to know what their dreams were like, how they spent their time. And so this project kind of, in the end, it manifested as a FM radio installation where a lot of these vets we interviewed, their stories were projected through an FM, like a localized FM station, that you'd get a little recorder and you'd walk around and you listen to these interviews in different places in the landscape. Sort of a long-winded answer, I'm realizing. But through the research for this project, I also interviewed a number of Soviet vets that fought on the other side. One guy was like a nuclear submarine captain. One guy was an Air Force pilot, and it was they've both immigrated to the US, so they have a little bit softer ideas of Americans now, but it was just interesting to kind of look at those dualities. And in doing this research, I came across a military manual that taught soldiers how to calculate the the death impact, essentially the casualty impact from a nuclear blast at daytime with warning over different types of cities. And this booklet had some of these types of maps in it. And I was just so struck by how calm and calculated these maps were, and like the chaos and destruction they ultimately represented. And I really wanted to work with that visual language, but also like add that human aspect to it, or this energy of life, and present that, put that back into the work, so it's not just this like cold map, but also it has this like energy of life. So a little bit of a long-winded answer, but obviously being from the Soviet Union, you know, the Cold War was such a big part of my upbringing. And, you know, even still, like you turn on the TV and Russians are pretty much always the bad guys. And, you know, it's a complicated identity to have to live with. And I'm still grappling with that stuff, you know.
Great. So there are a couple of other questions I want to get to before we head out today. But Angelia asked, what was becoming a mother the reason you started looking into your lineage?
In part, of course, you know, you start to want to, my husband's American. And so, you know, that you know, what's lost, what's gained. I wanted to make sure that my daughter had some base knowledge of like where she comes from, but it actually was spurred by something a little different. My mom randomly mentioned that our ancestors were from this region. She like was holding on to this knowledge. And we also did our ancestry DNA. And so it kind of like all these things coalescing together gave me a few different points of connection to start weaving a little bit more of a story together.
Interesting. And then Maria asks, did you ever consider being an architect? I think the answer to that is yes. But
I did consider it. I even did a program at Harvard before going to graduate school called the Career Discovery Program. And I discovered that I did not want a career as an architect, but I found it really exciting to learn the tools of an architect. And I realized what I really wanted to do was expand my work into architectural spaces and to deal with architectural scale. But ultimately, I still just wanted to make art.
Great. And then Lisa asks, did other artists, especially landscape artists, influence you?
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, I'm an art professor. My artist list of people I love and hold dear to my heart is extremely long, so it's hard to just point at, you know, one or two people. But yeah, I mean, I think that there are lots of other artists that do really interesting work with both art and science and site-specific works, and people that work with found materials or commonplace objects. There's lots of artists that really influence me. If you email me, I'm happy to send you a list.
Awesome. And then we're going to ask Madeline, and then Sue, we'll get to you in 1 second. Madeline asks if shamanism now resonates with you.
Well, I mean, there's things about it that are interesting to me. I certainly don't feel like I'm a shaman in any true sense of the word. I think artists can use their own build their own mythology and practice to kind of help guide your own creation of your work. And so it looks intense. I mean, I think it's hard to kind of have to confer with all the spirits all the time. I'm not sure I'm fully like strong enough to really do that. I super admire it, and I think it's interesting to me. I'm learning more about it, and I think there's aspects of their belief systems that really appeal to me and resonate with me just intuitively in terms of like respect for nature, or believing in Earth's living systems, how we're all interconnected. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway for me through all this research has been realizing that indigenous practices, including shamanism, actually really align with some of the kind of newer science about living systems and how everything's connected. And I feel like a lot of these cultures have kept that reverence and practice alive, and now Western culture is finally like, oh yeah, actually maybe you were right all along and it wasn't silly or crazy, but now we have scientific evidence to prove to prove that, you know, trees can talk to each other and pass nutrients to other systems, and that, you know, you take out a keystone species and the whole thing collapse, you know, the whole ecosystem collapses. And so I think that's been really cool to kind of integrate like the mythical and the scientific and find that there's a lot of connection.
Great. We're going to ask Sue to ask her question. Go ahead, Sue.
I wanted to know if you went cave exploring to set up the intro. I come from a region, it's a tourist trap, it's a tourist exhibit, but it's the DeSoto Caverns in Childersburg, Alabama. And from that experience of being able to walk through those caves, it set a different experience. It set a very real experience for me to enjoy your artwork better and to look at it through being underground. So I was just wondering if you'd done any cave exploring or anything else to help set that tone.
Yeah, thanks for your question. That's great. I've done a little bit. I'm not like a professional cave explorer, but I, you know, as a child, I really remember visiting, I think it's called Luray Caverns in Virginia. That was a pretty cool, I think those were the first big caverns I really went to. And then a few years back, my partner and I traveled to Iceland and we got to explore a really cool cave in Iceland, and that was super fun. The way this piece came together is I drew some plans and elevations and said, can you make the cave like this? And it was a collaboration. So it's totally an imagined cave. It's not a particular cave. But, you know, the title of it is a little bit of an homage to Werner Herzog's pretty great documentary called Cave of Forgotten Dreams. Yeah. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. And they have a really great moment in there where they 3D map the whole cave. And that visual was in my mind when we started working on this cave.
Fantastic. Let's ask one more question. And Delaney in the chat says, you weren't raised Judeo-Christian. Do you feel like that gives you a different perspective on shamanism?
Perhaps it's hard to know, right? Because I've only lived my own experience, so it's hard to know. But I do feel like there are a lot of cultural references that I'm not always tuned into because I didn't have that fundamental knowledge of like the Bible, etc. Obviously, by being a Westerner, I've absorbed a lot of these stories through osmosis. But I think it allows me to be a little bit, hopefully, be a little bit more open-minded and not as fixed in my dogmas. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
Give it a try.
Yeah. So yeah, I would love to stay here and just keep chatting, but we're gonna head out. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you so much, Yulia, for joining us today and talking about this beautiful exhibition. Please go check it out if you haven't already. To everybody, it's at archergallery.space. And it's just a beautiful, you know, show, and the drawings are fantastic. And the immersive cave experience with the videos, it just feels like it comes kind of full circle as we see behind me here. So yes, archergallery.space, check it out, and check out also next week, Robert Minervini's art talk at noon, a friend of both Yulia and I's. So please come back for that. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, mraymond@clark.edu. Otherwise, thanks so much again for coming, and we'll see you next time. All right.
Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Really nice to see some friendly faces. Hi Maria, hi Andy, hi Kieran. And if you have any feedback or questions, feel free to email me. I'm pretty easy to find on the internet or Instagram, yuliapink.com. I'd love to hear what you think of the show. This is kind of a new thing for us. So anyway, thank you all.
Fantastic. Thanks all. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.